Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. So in the next 20 minutes, I'm going to talk about serverless, specifically AWS Lambdas and AWS ecosystem that has to do with serverless implementation. And essentially, we're going to talk about how do you implement serverless and run that in production in a way that actually allow you to monitor and understand and make sure that you don't have problems. And if you have problems, to understand how to troubleshoot and find the root cause. So quick word about serverless. Serverless allow you to develop at a much faster pace because you don't need to maintain servers, you don't need to provision them, you don't need to deploy an operating system, you don't need to actually go and patch or updates on a weekly basis. You focus on writing your code and getting this, do your business logic. So specifically, what you want to do once you got your serverless environment up and running, you want to make sure, like always, that you're able to reach business continuity. And for that, you need three things. You need, first of all, to understand when something goes wrong. You want to get an alert on it. Then, after the alert, you need to understand what is the business impact. Is this really impacting my customers, or is this something I can ignore? And number three, if this is really impacting my environment, I want to find the root cause as fast as possible. And that's essentially what we do. We connect to your serverless environment, your AWS Lambdas, and allow you to understand what's going on. So LUMIGO is a SaaS platform. It's very easy to onboard. You just get a username and password and log in. And it takes you through the three stages I mentioned. At the very start, you get to see all the issues in your environment. You can get it via Slack alert, you can get it in PagerDuty, emails, whatever you like. Specifically here, I can see that I have a specific Lambda that is failing, so I can understand when it failed and what was the actual failure. And by clicking on a specific failure, I can get to the story of that transaction. I can understand step by step what happened when this transaction was executed. So this is the story. This is the Lambda that actually failed. And LUMIGO is able to show you what happened. Started from an API gateway, triggering a Lambda, which actually accessed Stripe, UPS, wrote to a queue, in this case SNS, another Lambda, DynamoDB, Twilio. So you really understand the details of this specific invocation. So very quickly, I can understand which API is actually failing due to this internal error. But more than that, I actually now want to fix it because this is a sales processing API. It's pretty important. In order to understand how do I fix it, I need to basically go and understand the root cause. And as a developer, when I need to understand an exception, I go to my stack trace, and I basically look at the deepest layer in the stack trace to start investigating. In our case, since this is serverless, and as a concept, this is microservices, I need to go to the deepest microservice. So this is my DynamoDB. So I want to understand what is this exception in my DynamoDB, and LUMIGO allows you to get all the information about that specific exception. So I can see all the information about what did we actually try to write to that DynamoDB, which objects, and what was the DynamoDB response. In this example, it was an exception due to an empty string. So now I understand what happened. I understand the symptoms. Somebody tried to write an empty string. We can actually see this is the input. We see that there's an empty string in the input. Okay, so I figured out what happened. But this is still not the end of the story because I don't know where that empty string is coming from. So what I need to do is go one level up in the stack trace or go upstream to understand where is this empty string generated from. So let's go one level up. We can see this Lambda is also failing. And we can see all the information about the Lambda, whether it's a cold or warm start. We can see the duration. But more importantly, we can go in and understand the details of the execution of that specific Lambda. So again, I can see that this lambda has an exception. I can see the stack trace of that lambda over here. And I can see the inputs to this lambda, the outputs, the environment variables, the logs of that lambda, anything I need to actually get in order to drill down and understand the root cause. Specifically, over here, I want to look at the inputs of the lambda because I want to check if the shipment confirmation ID is something the lambda generated or it just got it as an input. Two very different scenarios. So looking at the input parameters, I can see that the lambda got the shipment confirmation ID from somebody upstream. So that means I don't need to waste my time drilling into that lambda because she's not the one who is causing that error. She just got a parameter and she passed it along. So again, we need to go upstream. We can go to the SNS, to the other lambda, and so on and so forth until we can actually find who is a service that actually created this shipment confirmation ID, which is empty. Long story, I'm running fast forward. We have a UPS API over here. We're actually tracking external APIs as well. And the same goes to the UPS. We can actually go and understand what are the inputs and outputs of the external UPS API. So this was a request for UPS, and this was an internal server error over here. So I can deduct that shipment confirmation ID might come from this error in UPS. Another thing that is very interesting beyond just going and understanding the root cause is understanding things about the overall transactions. Like, for example, how much time am I spending processing all of this transaction, not one by one, not just like the time the user is waiting for, but the overall transaction. So this is something we calculate here. And another thing that is quite interesting is how much do I pay? And in serverless environment, you can actually know how much money you pay per a specific transaction. You can think of it as buying coffee in Starbucks. When you buy coffee in Starbucks, you actually know, Starbucks actually know how much it costs them to produce that coffee for you. And based on that, they do their pricing. And serverless, for the really first time in IT history, can do the same. We can actually tell you how much it costs to run this transaction, because we know how much this costs and how much this costs to the microcents, because it really has to do with this specific amount of time this Lambda run, this API gateway run. So we can see that this Lambda costs 7 microcents. This transaction costs 7 microcents. But more interesting, we can actually aggregate that and give you a report. How much this transaction cost me in the last day, in the last month. How much it compared to last day. So you can actually have very granular cost visibility of your serverless environment. The last thing I want to show is about monitoring serverless. This was an error of serverless, but I want to show you how you can actually monitor your serverless environment, even if there is no specific error. What we actually do, we show you a list of all of your functions of the service. In this case, AWS Lambdas in your environment. And so I have 36 of those. For every function, I can see when it was last modified, like when was the last deployment of a developer, what was the configuration of memory, timeout, how many invocations in the last day, and how many errors. So I can sort this, for example, by, let's say, by the number of invocations. So I can see that in the last day there was 14,000 invocation of that specific Lambda. I can see what was the average duration. And more interesting, I can look at the Lambda that has the most errors. So this Lambda had 9 errors, so I might want to check what's going on with this Lambda. And by clicking on a specific Lambda, I can actually get to each and every invocation of that Lambda. So I can investigate each of the failures and understand what happened. I can see per invocation that there was invocation, whether it was warm or cold, how much time it took, how much did it actually cost. Again, microcents, so you can aggregate that. And what was the exception. And again, from here, a single internal Lambda is not that interesting, but understanding the impact is what interesting. So from a single Lambda, I can go and ask again, show me the story of the transaction, and get the entire transaction story in a visual way. So thank you very much for tuning in. We're LUMIGO. If you're interested, you're welcome to talk to me after this or come to our booth. It's 612. And we're also offering serverless consulting services. So if you're planning to go serverless and you want to have a workshop about what is right to go with serverless, what is not, what are better use cases, what is the right architecture, how do I build CI/CD pipeline for serverless, this is something that we also do. Thank you very much.